So it's almost June, summertime, and that means beaches, barbecues, swimming pools. There are certain things that sort of fit in the reality of summer and warm weather. Obviously, we need to be careful, social distance, but there are certain things that traditionally speak to us about the summer, and they equate summertime with doing those things. There are certain things that actually we think back to the colder winter months. Certain things that fit into the winter months, whether it be skiing in January or bobsledding in February. But there are certain realities that happen at certain seasons of the physical calendar, certain things that are easier to access. If you want to go swimming, you can, it's easy to go swimming in July and August. If you want to go skiing, it's easy to go skiing in January and February. Certain things achievable at certain times of the year. Our rabbis tell us that the mystical teachings, actually the same is true in the spiritual calendar. We often think of a calendar being in a linear, vertical line. And we see things as what was many, many years ago, in a straight line from today. But our rabbis teach us that actually it goes in a circle. The seasons, the spiritual seasons, also have a cycle. There's a certain time of year where it's easier to achieve forgiveness. And that's sometimes we refer to as the time of year of Yom Kippur. There's a certain season and time of year where it's easier to achieve freedom. And that's what we know when we celebrate Passover. That doesn't mean you can't access those things other times of the year. Just like if you really want to go swimming in the winter, you can get a heated swimming pool. If you want to go skiing in the summer, you can get fake snow. But there are certain things that are easier at certain seasons. And so it's true in the spiritual calendar as well. In fact, we often say that the reason that we celebrate freedom around Passover time is because freedom is in the air. It's easier to go free at that time of year. And that's why the Jewish people left Egypt at that time of year, because freedom was in the air. And if there was something that you wanted to become free from, a bad habit or a bad relationship, it's easier to access that freedom around that time of year. It's easier, it's in the air in order to achieve it. So the question is, as tomorrow night, or tonight actually, is Shavuot, the festival that we celebrate, the receiving of the Torah, the giving of the Torah actually, what is the spiritual reality? What's easier to achieve at this time of year? What is this time of year? What's in the air for us to access? Cheesecake, dairy foods, those are customs, but there's got to be more to it. And really, we refer to the time of Shavuot, the festival, now as Zman Matan Toratenu. It's the time that God gave the Torah. Interestingly, its focus is on the giving of the Torah, not necessarily what we do when we have to receive the Torah. God certainly gives it at this time of year, but the question for all of us at this time of year is, are we going to receive it? Really, each Shavuot, each time of this spiritual reality that we arrive, we're actually arriving at the same point of sanctity experienced by our forefathers at Mount Sinai. It's once again, in a real sense, the time of the giving of the Torah. And we are invited to accept it anew as they did over 3,000 years ago. But interestingly, in the Torah, when it tells us about this festival of Shavuot, it doesn't actually give us a date as to when it falls. If you look in the Torah, there's lists of dates of festivals. Rosh Hashanah is the first day of Tishrei. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. Sukkot is the 15th day of Tishrei. Each festival comes in its right time. Passover, you bring the sacrifice of the lamb on the 14th and the Seder the night of the 15th, right? Each festival has its date. But for Shavuot, it's conspicuously missing. It doesn't tell us the date. All it says is that it's 50 days after the beginning of Passover. But if Passover is always on the 15th of Nisan, so then 50 days later will always be Vav, or the 6th of Sivan. Why doesn't the Torah tell us the date? Why does it leave it blank and not tell us what date it's going to be? We can do the math, right? We just have to count 50 days and you'll be there at the festival of Shavuot. Why doesn't it tell us the actual date, which will always be exactly the same date? And I heard a beautiful answer. And the idea and the concept really is like this. Because if you have a date of the receiving of the Torah, you might set your calendar, you might have a reminder, maybe you give yourself, a couple 15-minute notice, right? But you're just gonna have a calendar reminder. You're gonna show up on Shavuot, here I am, I'm ready to celebrate. Well, it doesn't work that way. Shavuot, or really more importantly, the giving of the Torah, and even more importantly, for us to receive the Torah, that has to be a process that you build up towards. That has to be a process that you prepare for. 50 days, it's about the journey. How do I prepare to be a person who's ready to accept this great gift that God is giving us on Shavuot? You can't just show up. It's a process. There's no shortcuts to greatness. And that's really the concept of why the Torah leaves out this date. It requires hard work. It requires you to set goals. You can't just, you have to have achievable targets. You have to have a step-by-step journey in order to get there. So we count, we prepare. 50 days from Passover. And the journey is about how do we get there. If you haven't been counting, don't worry. That's why we're here now. It's never too late. It's not all or nothing. Ideally, I probably should have mentioned this 50 days ago, but it's not too late now. And in fact, this session right now is really so that we can prepare, so we can get the most that we can out of this festival. But interestingly, as we are doing that counting that I mentioned, we don't actually count perhaps in the way that we would normally count. Often, people count things all the time. People like to count their money. People like to count their Facebook friends. People like to count how many likes they got on Instagram. People like to count things, right? But also when we count and we're looking forward to something, usually we tend to count down. It's the final countdown, right? I'm not going to sing it, but there's a reality to, when you're looking forward or even trepidation towards something. You have a review with your boss in 2 weeks' time, in 1 week time, or you're looking forward to something. You're going on vacation, on a holiday. It's only 3 more sleeps until we take off on that plane, which we're looking forward to be able to doing when this complex time is over and the lockdown is over, right? We count down towards things that we're looking forward to. How many days until I can go on vacation? How many days until my big exam, et cetera? We count down only 10 days, only 8 days, et cetera. But on the commandment that we have to count the days from Passover to Shavuot, we're actually commanded to count up. Today is day 1. Today is day 2. And then we get to the weeks, right? Today is day 7, which is 1 week of the Omer. We're counting up, going up to day 17, to day 19, to day 25, to day 47. We're counting up until we finally get to the 50th day, the complete count of the Omer from Pesach, from Passover to Shavuot. And the question is, why do we count up? Why is it like that? And the insight is beautiful. And the reality is that when we count down towards something, when we say that we're going away on vacation in 3 days' time, if you sleep through Wednesday, Thursday is still going to come. You're still that much closer. You could do nothing, and you're still that much closer to your goal. Sleep through a day, and it's still going to be the next day, but not for this. If you're trying to achieve greatness, if you're trying to accept the Torah, to understand what it means to be moral and great, and have a vision of what greatness really is, you need to be active. You need to be creative. You need to be building 1 day, 1 week. You have to go through the journey, the step-by-step process to be able to achieve all that it is set out for you for this great and momentous occasion of receiving the Torah at Sinai. It can't be that you just show up, and it also can't be that you're passive. You have to be active, and that's the other reason why we don't have a date. It's a build-up. It's a process in order to get there. But as we talk about time, that's another insight to this time of year as well, because the journey from Passover to Shavuot is really not just a historical one, but also a procedural one. The Jewish people were slaves in Sinai, and we all have certain aspects of slavery within us that we have to shed ourselves from. And a slave's time is not their own. When the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt, the Egyptians forced them to work all hours of the night and day. Some of us feel that in our lockdown now, that there is no day, there is no night, right? There's never a time for our own self, for me time. As slaves, we had no choice as to how we used the minutes and the hours that made up our lives. So another reason that we find that the Jews celebrate this experience in the way they do, because when the Exodus of Passover, when the Exodus of Egypt happened, in a flash, they became free. Their time was now their own. And now they have a new commandment, to count the days until Shavuot, till receiving of the Torah. When they would receive the Torah, that was the significance of the counting, because by counting each day separately, building upon each day, a person realizes how valuable each day really is. A day that goes by without using it properly for meaning and accomplishments is a day that really has been squandered. You've lost the opportunity. So today is day 1. Have I achieved everything that I can? Have I become the most that I can at day 1? Great. Let's go on to day 2. Day 3, day 4, when a person is training for something great, when a person, in fact, when you think about the counting of real achievements, right? That's the way we do when we're training for a marathon, if you're running, right? So today I did a mile, next week I did 2 miles, the next week I did 5 miles. When you're thinking about and recounting all of the wonderful things, the growth processes, we do count up, and that's exactly what's going on here. We're realizing that time matters, and time is actually something that we want to cherish. We'll never get back that time. And we want to be able to make sure that this day that will never come back again was used to its fullest and to its maximum, so we can achieve our maximum and the most that we possibly can. As a person counts the days of the Omer to make sure that they're using every day to its fullest, that's the experience, that's the opportunity that we have at this time of year. The process is a growth process, hinted to, interestingly, in this connection between the physical season and the spiritual season as they combine. So with this, we have to take a step back. Really, people often refer to the Jewish calendar as a lunar calendar, as a lunar cycle. But it's actually a little bit of a fallacy. The calendar that Islam uses is a strictly lunar calendar, and that's why you'll find, actually recently, people have mentioned it to me, that Ramadan comes out at different times of the year. Because if you're talking about strictly a lunar calendar, the lunar calendar is 10 days shorter than the solar calendar, and therefore, as time goes on, it's always going to fall back. And in the Jewish calendar, we link the lunar and the solar calendar. There's certain spiritual and physical connections that we have to interlock. So Passover is always Chag HaAviv. It's the festival that is celebrated during the springtime. So actually, as we lose 10 days in the lunar calendar compared to the solar calendar every year, what we do is approximately once every 3 years, we add another month to the Jewish calendar, Adar Sheni, a second month, so that we can catch up 30 days, so that over the 10 days that we lost over approximately 3 years. Passover is always in the spring. And actually what we find is that in Passover time, we celebrate the barley harvest. It's an early crop that comes out in the earlier parts of the spring. From an agricultural perspective, barley is always sort of referred to, certainly historically, as a food that was primarily used or mainly used as animal food. Barley was the cheaper animal food. And that's what we celebrate being able to harvest around Passover time. Whereas Shavuot, 50 days later, a little bit deeper into the season, right, we actually harvest the wheat. And wheat is looked at as a human food. And actually the experience that we go from slavery to receiving of the Torah is actually hinted to towards these two harvests. Because the animal food that we harvested around Passover time is actually indicating the animalistic sides of who we are. It's the body. It's the body side of who we are. It's the animal side of who we are. And our body often wants to sleep. It wants to eat. It wants to focus on the here and now. But we don't really see ourselves just as physical human beings. We actually want to take it a couple of steps further. So we build 1 day, 2 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, until we get to Shavuot. And Shavuot, we start to focus on the wheat, which is the soul. It's the human elements of who we are. And human beings, souls, they want to be deeply loved, not just focus on lust. They want to be able to create, to be moral, to be kind. And when the body says, I just want to hit the snooze button, the soul says, no, I want to get up and make a difference to this world. And that's the beauty of Torah. Accepting the Torah and Shavuot is helping us get from that balance of the body and the soul. Because we also don't negate the body. That's not the Jewish way. We don't believe in taking an oath of poverty or an oath of celibacy in order to be holy. We actually believe that you have to combine the two. We have to figure out a process where we go from the barley of Passover to the wheat of Shavuot, where we take ourselves and synthesize and recognize that the opportunity that we have to take all of the bodily functions and elevate them towards something spiritual and meaningful. That's the journey that we're going on as we culminate the experience at Shavuot time. And interestingly, the Talmud tells us an amazing story. The Talmud tells us a story that actually, I think, really typifies this experience that we're going through right now. The quest to figure out how much of a body we are and how much of a soul we are. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi actually tells us in the Talmud a fascinating story. From the Medrash, it's brought down in the Talmud that Moses, when he ascends to heaven to receive the Torah from God, the angels complain to God, and the angels say to God, Master of the universe, right? Why are you giving Torah to these humans? Flesh and blood, you're going to give it to them. They're fallible, they make mistakes, they're animalistic, right? These humans, you're going to give the Torah to them. How could it be? Leave the Torah here in heaven with us, the angels. And God says to Moses, Moses, why don't you answer the angels? So Moses looks at God and says, okay, what God, master of the universe, what does it say in the Torah? Tell me a little bit of an excerpt. Tell me some of the highlights. And God replies and he says, the first of the 10 commandments, he says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Moses looks at the angels. He says, did you go to Egypt? Were you slaves in Egypt? Did God take you out of the slavery that you were enslaved from Pharaoh? Did you receive the Torah at Sinai? It says so in the book itself. And the angels have to say, you're right. No, that wasn't us, right? Moses then turns to God and he says, what else does it say? And God says, well, it says that you shouldn't recognize false gods, fall prey to idol worship. And Moses says, you, the angels, you live with God, you're close to God, you understand God, you think you're going to live in a world that worships idols? That's not for you. Then Moses asks God, what else does it say? And God says, it says, observe or remember the Shabbat to keep it holy. And Moses turns to the angels. He says, did you engage with labor for 6 days that you're required to rest from it on the seventh? Right? That's not for you. And what else does it say? God says, it says, honor your father and mother. Right? And Moses says to the angels, are you human beings that went through a birthing process? Do you have a father and a mother? Of course not. Right? And then it says, you should not murder. And Moses says, what? You're gonna murder? You can't even kill. Right? You're gonna commit adultery. You shouldn't steal. Right? Are you jealous, angels, of anything that's gonna happen? It doesn't make any sense. Right? Do you have an evil inclination? Moses says to the angels, and eventually the angels immediately, after hearing all these arguments from Moses, they concede to God. They say, you're right. In fact, it does seem to be that this Torah is best suited, right, to be given to mankind. Because the mitzvot, the Torah, what the angels recognize, and really metaphorically what this Talmud is telling us, is that the Torah was designed specifically for navigating a challenging physical world. We are human beings, and we do make mistakes. And that Torah that we receive and that we accept on Shavuot is uniquely applicable to the human fallacies, to becoming human, or recognizing the human nature and our material nature, to be able to recognize all of the things that we have in the physical world and uplift them to the spiritual, to become great through this amazing gift, this blueprint of the Torah. So on Shavuot, we stood united to receive this awesome book of instructions of living. Yeah, God gave us instructions for living. And who else knows the mechanics of humankind other than the Creator? Sometimes you get a new toy or a new device, a new phone, a new refrigerator, and you look at the manual, you look at the instruction book, and you throw it away. Maybe some of us are a bit egotistical. We say, I don't need an instruction manual, and then you can't figure out how to get the ice to be crushed. You can't figure out how to get your phone to copy and paste. You can't figure out the details. You have to find in the bottom of the drawer that you left the instruction manual. When you realize what the device could have done, if you knew how to use all of the shortcuts to begin with, you realize how you could have maximized this machinery, how you could have maximized this device. We lose out by not focusing and reading the instruction manual properly. God gave us an amazing gift on Shavuot. He gave us the gift of the instruction manual. What's going to make man tick best in this physical world that we live? Yes, we live in a physical world, but we need to elevate it to the spiritual. What's going to make me happy? What's going to make me a moral person? What's going to make me a charitable person? What's going to make me a good parent, a good neighbor, a good friend, a good sibling? What's going to make me great, godly, and awesome? That's what the Torah is. It's instructions for living, teaching us how to be the best that we can, navigating in this physical world, step by step, journey by journey, building up towards greatness, setting our sights, setting our goals, and recognizing that we have a job to do. And it's about the journey, not necessarily the destination. It's about, as Rav Noach Weinberg used to always say, how hard you're growing within the ladder, not exactly what rung you are right now. Every person's journey is going to be different. And where you're standing in the ladder is, yes, it's unique to your circumstances, who your parents are, who your family is, your education. And God doesn't judge us where we are on the ladder, but rather how hard we're working to grow within our realm. So yes, Shavuot is about the journey. It's about recognizing the process that it requires to become great. And that was in our DNA, and our spiritual DNA from the very beginning. Abraham was told, Lech Lecha, the first words that God says to Abraham, the first commandment given to our forefather Abraham was go on a journey. The Jewish people are about this journey. And it's required from us to recognize that step by step, there are no shortcuts. It's going to take one day at a time, and we're going to build up to become greater and greater. So on Shavuot, we actually raise a glass of wine. We make kiddush. We say we're going to sanctify something that potentially could be very mundane. We can make a l'chaim with this wine, or also we can become drunks with this wine, right? We can intoxicate beyond human recognition, or we could take the wine and elevate it. We can make Shavuot into that journey, recognizing that we could take the physical world and make it something greater. We also might have a piece of cheesecake, elevating the food, right? And enjoying and accepting this divine wisdom of the Torah, most importantly, to help us be the best that we can be, to recognize that we have challenges and we have a journey to go on. But with the instruction book for life, with the help of God, we can achieve true greatness and become the best that we really can. So I wish you all a wonderful and happy Chag Sameach, a great festival, an opportunity where God is reaching out to us, giving us this gift. And all we have to do is open our hands and recognize how wonderful of a gift it is and accept it. Zman Matan Torasenu. It's a time that God gives us the Torah, and hopefully we will be able to be there ready and willing and able to receive it so we can become a true partner in this world and become great human beings. All the best. Chag Sameach.